أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Just to recap, what did we do last week? Last Sunday? Who remembers? What did we talk about? Ali? You weren't here? Okay. Who remembers? You've all forgotten, huh? Okay, so the wajibat and the sunnah of prayer. Okay, good. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the next pillar of Islam after Salah, after the prayer. Who can tell me what that is? The next pillar after Salah. Zakat. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Zakat. And Zakat is very, very important because Allah says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. He says, establish the prayer and give zakah. Give zakah. So it's one of the pillars of Islam. And if somebody doesn't give zakah, and he says, I don't need to give zakah. Zakah isn't that important. It's not something you have to do as a Muslim. If somebody says that and he doesn't give zakah, then he's not a Muslim. He isn't a Muslim because he doesn't believe that he has to give zakah. So in order for you to be a Muslim, you have to make sure that you give zakah.
If there's like a Christian company, a charity company, and you give them like charity, is that?
We're going to be talking about who you give zakah to, inshallah. Okay, so zakah is something which every single person has to give. Yeah, and also the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned in a hadith about those who don't give zakah and about what their punishment would be. And he said that on the day of judgment, there's going to be everything, okay, all his deeds are going to be in front of him, and his wealth is going to be in front of him. For the one who never gave zakah, that wealth that he never used to give for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal will appear before him on the day of judgment in the form of a serpent. His wealth that he never used to give in the way of Allah will come in the form of a serpent with two horns. And this snake that will come, this serpent that will come, is going to wrap around the body of the one who never used to give any zakah. So the snake is going to wrap around that person's body. And then the serpent will hold him with his two jawbones. And then that serpent and that snake will say to that person, he will say, I am your wealth, I am your hoarded treasure. I am that treasure that you never used to give for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. That money that you were so stingy in keeping and not giving to the poor and not doing what you were supposed to do with that wealth. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish the person on that day because he wasn't giving his wealth for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. So it's very, very important, okay, that a person gives zakah. What are the benefits of giving zakah? Who can tell me? What are the benefits of giving zakah? Okay, very good. It purifies a person's wealth. Yeah, because Allah says, خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً. Take from their wealth charity. خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا. That because of this giving in charity, okay, it will purify a person. And it will purify a person's wealth. And when a person's wealth is purified, he's going to increase in his wealth. Allah is going to bless him when it comes to his wealth. Give me another benefit. Another benefit of giving in zakah. The most obvious benefit. Sorry? Very good. Yeah, you're helping others. Those who aren't as fortunate as you, you're helping them by giving them something, something from your wealth. So you give them in charity, you give to the poor people some of the zakah, and you're helping others. So those who aren't able, those who are poor, they're being helped, okay, by you giving them some of their wealth or some of your wealth. So that's the benefits of giving zakah. And when it comes to zakah, when do you have to give zakah? How much do you have to give? And how much money do you have to have in order for you to give zakah? So say somebody wanted to give zakah, how much money would he have to have at the beginning in order for him okay, to give zakah in the first place. Because it's not obligatory upon every single person. You have to have a certain amount of money in order for zakah to be obligatory upon you. You have to have a certain amount of money in order for you to give zakah. So if you have a certain amount of money, if you have that much money, then you give zakah. If you have below that amount of money, then you don't give zakah. And the amount, okay, that a person should have in order for him to give zakah is about 435 pounds. It's about 435 pounds. And why do we say 435 pounds? Because in the Prophet ﷺ's time, they never had pounds, did they? So you weigh it, you measure it according to a certain amount of gold and silver. Okay, so the equivalent, okay, when it comes to today and when it comes to pounds in this country, it would be equivalent to around 435 pounds. So if a person has 435 pounds, then he gives zakah. If he has less than that, roughly less than that, then he doesn't give zakah. He doesn't give zakah. And when it comes to zakah, you pay 2.5% of your wealth. So say if somebody has £1,000, okay, he pays 2.5% of that £1,000, okay, 2.5% of all his wealth. Okay, now who has to pay zakah? The one who has that amount of money, yeah? Who else? So say if I went out onto the street now and I found someone, I said, you have to pay zakah. Does he have to pay zakah? If I just go to anybody on the street and I say to him, you have to pay zakah, why haven't you given zakah? Who has to pay zakah? Huh? Muslims. Yeah, you have to be Muslim. Say if I went to a little baby. Say if I went to a little Muslim baby and I said, you have to pay zakah, why haven't you paid zakah? Huh? So it's still a Muslim.
But you can't say it to the baby
because it's not old enough. Because it's not old enough. So you have to be old enough and you have to be a Muslim and you have to have the right amount of money. You have to have the right amount of money. So if you have the right amount of money and you're a Muslim and you're old enough, then you have to give zakah. What's the right amount of money that you have to have in order to give zakah? Ryan? Around 435 pounds. Yeah, around 435 pounds. Good. Okay. So a person gives this amount of money to those who aren't able to afford wealth and to those who are poor. Now, what do you have to give zakah on? What are those things that a person has to give zakah on? There are certain things that a person has to give zakah on. If he has gold and silver, then he has to pay zakah on that. So you have to see how much gold and silver he has and then pay according to how much gold and silver he has. And if he has money, then obviously if he has money, then he has to look at how much money he has, £500, £600, £1,000, £5,000, and then he has to pay zakah on that money that he has in his bank account. Yeah. And also, if a person is if say for example he has a business and he has a shop, yeah, and he has a shop and he has items in that shop. So say for example he's got a sweet shop, yeah, and he's got apple flavored bonbons and he's got chewits and he's got all these different things that he's selling, yeah. All those items that he's selling in his shop, yeah, he needs to see how much items he has and then figure out how much money it's all worth, and then he needs to pay zakah on top of all of those things. Yeah? So you pay zakah on gold and silver, and you pay zakah on items that you're selling. Say if you have a shop, yeah, and you got items that you're selling, you look at all the items that you have, and then you figure out how much you have, and then you take 2.5% out of that stuff that you have. Also from the things that a person should give zakah on, for example, is livestock. So say for example if at home you've got some cows in your back garden, yeah, then you need to make sure that you pay zakah on that, or if you have chickens or if you have other types of cattle, yeah. But most of the time, nowadays, people living here, we don't really have like livestock. But that's another thing that a person needs to pay zakah on. Okay, so say if a person takes that amount of money and he gives it in charity, there are certain conditions. There are certain conditions that a person has to have in order for his zakah to be accepted. Yeah. So if a person has certain conditions, if certain conditions are met, then that zakah will be valid and it will be accepted. Yeah. So when it comes to zakah, there are certain things that need to be, certain conditions that need to be met. Who can tell me some of the conditions of giving in zakah? Some of the conditions. There's some conditions that a person has to have for all of his actions. What kind of conditions should a person have when he's giving zakah? Don't forget, zakah is an act of worship, isn't it? Zakah is an act of worship, just like salah, just like performing hajj, just like fasting. So what are some of the conditions that a person should have? Sorry? Okay, so say if it was haram money, then he doesn't have to pay zakah on that. Okay, but we're talking about conditions, okay, for the validity of zakah. So what are those things that you have to have when it comes to conditions in order for your zakah to be accepted? Intention. Yeah, a person has to have the right intention, just like with any other act of worship. If a person doesn't have the right intention and is doing it for the wrong reasons, then Allah Azza wa Jalla won't accept that zakah from him. So a person's intention, the Prophet ﷺ, said in a hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are but by intentions. Any act that a person does, any act that a Muslim does, he has to make sure that he's doing it purely for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, whatever act of worship it is, if it's salah, if it's fasting, if it's going on hajj. Some people, when they go on hajj, but they're not really interested in worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. Some of them, they just go for hajj because they're 60 years old or 70 years old and they've never been on hajj before and they've put it off for their whole life and they just want to go just so that they can say I went for hajj. So they're not really interested. And some people, even with zakat, the same thing. A person, he might have all this money, he might be giving to charity, but he's only giving it because he has to. So he feels like he has to give zakat, and he only gives zakah because he kind of feels like, I have to give it every single year, so I'm going to give it. But he's not doing it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. He doesn't feel that happiness when he's giving for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, and he doesn't have, the right intention and the right niyyah. Okay, also when it comes to zakah, one of the conditions is that the person that you're giving zakah to has to be someone who is in need of that zakah. Okay, it has to be someone who needs that zakah. So who do you give zakah to then? Who do you give zakah to? You give zakah to those who are poor, those who can't afford to live, those who don't have enough money to look after their basic necessities. Yeah, they don't have enough food, they don't have enough clothing, they're poor. Those people are those who you give zakah to. Yeah, those people are the people who you give zakah to. Also, when it comes to zakah, there's certain people who you don't give zakah to. Certain people who you don't give zakah to. From those people that you don't give zakah to is the descendants of the Prophet ﷺ. The descendants of the Prophet ﷺ, they don't accept zakah, and you don't give them charity. Okay, because they were the descendants of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he wouldn't accept charity. He would accept gifts, but he wouldn't accept charity. So those people, the descendants of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, you don't give them any charity. You don't give them any zakah. And once a companion, a famous companion, was in Medina, and his name was Salman al-Farisi. His name was Salman al-Farisi. And he was known as al-Farisi because he was from Persia. He was Persian. And he used to travel around Arabia looking for the truth. So he was searching for the truth. And at the beginning of his life, he was someone who was a fire worshipper. He was someone who used to worship fire in Persia. And when he left Persia, he traveled to different places to look for the truth. And he became a Christian. And so he lived in one place with one priest and with one rabbi. And when that priest passed away, the Christian priest and the Christian monk, when he passed away, he would tell him to go to another place, tell him about another righteous person who lived in another place, and he would go there and he would live there for a while. And then eventually he heard about a man who would be a messenger who would come to a certain place. And so he went to the city of Medina, and he was a slave at the time. When he was in Medina, they captured him and he became a slave of one of the people living in Medina. And when he heard about the Messenger of Allah ﷺ arriving in Medina, when he came from Mecca, he had heard from one of his teachers, from one of the Christian monks, about some of the signs of this messenger. And he said, one of the signs of this messenger is that when you give him charity, he won't accept it. If you give him charity, he won't accept it. But if you give him a gift, then he'll accept the gift. But if you give him charity, then he won't accept any charity. So Salman al-Farsi, he went to the house of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and he took some dates with him. And he wanted to see whether the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was actually the Messenger of Allah. And so he went and he gave him these dates, and he said, these are charity for you. This is charity for you. And so the Messenger of Allah ﷺ didn't keep it for himself. He took it and he gave it to others. He never kept any of it for himself. And so Salman al-Farsi realized, but then he thought maybe he won't accept gifts either. So the next day he came back and he had some dates, and he gave these dates to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. And what did he say? He never said this is charity. He said this is a gift for you. And so when he took this gift, when he gave this gift to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ didn't refuse the gift, and he accepted the gift. Okay? And the Salman al-Farsi, when he realized this, and he saw this, and he saw the other signs of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he became a Muslim, and he accepted Islam. And they say when he accepted Islam, he was very, very old. They say he was like in his 60s or in his 70s. When he accepted Islam, Salman al-Farsi was around 60 or 70 years old, because he had traveled loads of different places looking for the truth. And so a lot of time had gone by. So they say he was about 60 or 70 years old. So when it comes to those people who you don't give charity to, it's the descendants of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. Also, when it comes to those people that you don't give charity to, it's the person who's giving charity, his descendants, so his children. Okay, so he can't give zakat to his children. Yeah, he can't give zakat to his children, and he can't also give zakat to his parents. Okay, and when we say children, we're talking about children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. Yeah, all of those are considered to be children. They're all children. And also, when it comes to parents, it includes the parents and also grandparents and great-grandparents. So those people you don't give zakat to. Why don't you give zakat to those people? Why don't you give zakat to those people? Why don't you give zakat to your children? Because those people, you're supposed to be giving them enough money anyway. Those people, okay, it's a right upon you to look after them. And it's from the duties of a Muslim to look after his own parents and his own children. So a person doesn't give zakah when it comes to those people. Also when it comes to a person's husband or a person's wife. Yeah, you don't give zakah to your wife or to your husband. And when it comes to zakah, okay, we mentioned who you give zakah to, and we also mentioned who gives the zakah, and we mentioned how much you give. Okay, and when it comes to wealth, this is something which is very, very important. A person has to give zakah for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. You know, they say that today, okay, today in the world, they say that 1%, okay, they say 1% of the population of the whole world has 50% of the wealth of the world. So you've got the top 1% of people, they say they own about 50% of the wealth of the whole of the world. And the other 99% don't. So you've got 1% who are really, really, really rich, and they've got half of the wealth of the whole of the world. Huh? Yeah, lots and lots of money. 1% of the population of the whole world, they've got half of the wealth of the world. And that shows you how unjust things are. Yeah? And nowadays people do anything to make money. And they'll lie and they'll cheat and they'll do whatever they can to make as much money as they can. And this shows you also how people are poor. And it's one of the signs of the Day of Judgment that the Prophet ﷺ said that there will be people who are very, very rich, and there will be people who are very, very poor. And there will be a big gap between them. And you see this now. Yeah? You see how people who are living very successfully and they have lots of money, it's never enough for them. It's never enough for them to have this amount of money. So they always want more and more and more money. And they don't give it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And they're being very, very greedy with their wealth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we mentioned about the punishment of the people who don't give it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. So a person who doesn't give for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal is going to be a big punishment for him. And that wealth that he's accumulating, okay, that money that he's making is money which is haram, and it's money which isn't going to be of any benefit to him because he's not giving it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. So a person has to be very, very careful if he wants to give something for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Aqeel?
So if you find £20 on the street, what do you do?
If you find money on the street, then you don't take it. Okay? Yeah, you leave it because a person might come back and he might look for it. So you don't take that money. So when it comes to zakah, a person needs to give zakah. He has to give zakah. And the scholars, they talk about the benefits of zakah. They talk about the benefits of giving in charity. And one of the benefits is that a person isn't always worried about his own wealth. He's not worried about wealth. He's not worried about money. He's not always worried about making lots and lots of money, and then he gets scared when he loses some money, because he's always giving something for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Yeah, every single year he gives a certain amount of money for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he gives this wealth for Allah Azza wa Jal. Because when a person has lots and lots of money, okay, they say that if you don't control your money, then your money is going to control you. If you don't control your money, then your money is going to control you, and you're going to be under the control of your money. How is that possible? How can you be in control of your, how can money control you? What does that mean? Ryan? Okay, so it makes you lie and it makes you cheat. Okay, because of money. So because of money, you start doing things like that. What else? Why else? How else does money control you? How else does money control you? How else does wealth control you? Okay, say for example, a person has some money and somebody, maybe in his family, okay, needs some help. And he needs money badly. Or somebody that he knows needs money badly, someone who's very poor. And he has this money, but because of his greed, okay, and because of how much he's worried about his wealth, he doesn't give any of the money because he's afraid that he's going to lose that wealth. He's going to lose that money. So now he's not giving money to that person because he's afraid that he's going to lose that money because of the money itself. So now he's afraid to give money, even though it's going to help a person. If he gave that money to a poor person, it's going to help him, isn't it? It's going to help him in his life. But he's not giving that money because he's afraid that he's going to lose that money. So he doesn't give the money, he keeps it with him all the time. So that means that he's not in control of his money, because he's not deciding. It's the money that he's worried about. He's not worried about other people. It's the money that's controlling him, because he's not giving any of the money to anybody. So he ends up keeping that money for himself and making sure that nobody else takes that money that he has. Yeah. What are the benefits of zakah? Can you tell me? Who can give me some other benefits of zakah? Other benefits of zakah. So we said that it's a purification, and we said that it helps other people. What other benefits are there when a person gives zakah? What other benefits? Any other benefits? Very good. It will stop a person from being stingy and from being miserly, because he's giving in charity, he's giving to the poor. And one of the universities, they did some research. And they found that those people who give in charity, are generally happier than those who don't give in charity. And this wasn't just Muslims, it was everyone. They did this research and they found that a person who gives in charity was happier than the person who doesn't give in charity, because he feels better, because he feels like he's helping other people with his wealth. So he's benefiting other people when it comes to that wealth. Yeah, and when a person doesn't give money to charity, he's miserly, he's stingy, he's always worrying about his wealth, and he's always worrying that someone's going to take his wealth. Yeah, so it stops a person from being happy, stops a person from being content, because he's always worried. He's always worried about his money decreasing. You know, a person has like £1,000 in his account, and then he has to give £100 or £200, and he's really worried. It's like, oh, all my money's going, where's my money going? And he becomes scared about his wealth, even though it's not going to affect his wealth. And if a person gives in charity, and he gives for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase him in his wealth. So it's the opposite. When a person gives in charity, he's not actually losing money. He actually makes money, because Allah Azza wa Jal blesses his wealth. So a person, when he gives for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses his wealth and He gives him more money. So if you want to be millionaires, yeah, then you should give for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. If you give your zakah, okay, and you give to the poor, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you even more money. And that's why there's a story of this man who would come to the masjid, and this man, he used to say that I used to see this man coming to the masjid, and sometimes I would see him and he would come to the masjid, and he was like a businessman, he had his own business. And so sometimes he would come to the masjid with an envelope, with a thick envelope, and he would put it in the donation box. And sometimes he would come and he would do this. So sometimes, not all the time, but just sometimes. And so the man, he said, I wanted to ask him why he does this. And so he asked him, I hope you don't mind me asking you, but why do you give? What's in that envelope, and why do you give it sometimes? What's the reason? And this man, he said to him that I own a business. And he said, sometimes I do well in the business, and sometimes I'm not doing very well. And he said, when I'm not doing very well, I take some of that money and I put it in an envelope and I give it in charity. And he said, whenever I do this, my business takes off again. And I do really well in my business after that. So when he's losing money in his business, that's when he takes the money and he gives it in charity. Because when a person gives in charity, okay, Allah gives you more wealth. Allah blesses you with wealth. So look how clever this man was. When he was losing money, he realized that one of the reasons maybe that he's losing money is because he isn't giving enough money to charity. So he used to take some money and he used to put it in the donation box, and straight after that he used to say that my business used to, do really well, and I used to be really successful, and I would make even more money than before. So if someone is feeling that maybe he's not got enough money, maybe he's losing money, maybe you might go home and look at your piggy bank and see there's not enough money in there, where's all the money gone? Then you should give some more money in charity, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you even more money than you had before. It's from the blessings of giving in zakat, from the blessings of giving in charity. And if a person does this, and if every single person gave charity and they all gave zakat to the poor and to the needy every single year, then also one of the other benefits is there won't be such a big gap. There won't be such a big gap between the really rich and the really poor. There's not going to be such a big gap, because the people at the top, the really rich people, they're going to be giving in charity to the poor. And then slowly, okay, there won't be such a big gap, and the really poor people, they'll have money as well as those who are well off. Yeah, so everyone's helping everybody else. Yeah, and this is why the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah Azza wa Jal, okay, Wallahu fi awni al-abdi ma kana al-abdu fi awni akhi, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps his slave so long as the slave helps his Muslim brother. So say for example you're worried about something and you feel like you need some help from Allah Azza wa Jalla, no one else is helping you. Then if you want help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you should help your Muslim brothers and sisters. If you're helping your Muslim brothers and sisters, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you. If you're not helping other people in this world and looking after them and helping them when it comes to money and when it comes to other things, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't help you. If you help other people and you help your fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you and He'll look after you, and if anytime you need something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it to you because you've always been helping other people. Somebody comes to you and says, I need some help, I need some money or I need something else. Then you help that person, you don't turn him away, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see this. And He'll see that you're helping other people, and then He'll help you because of that. But if you don't help other people and you turn away from them and you start making excuses not to help them, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't help you. Allah Azza wa Jal won't help you. So it's very important that a person always helps other people. Yeah? And one of the ways of helping is to give in zakat, is to give in charity. So this is what I want to talk about when it comes to zakat, how much you give and who you give it to and which person has to give zakat. Yeah? So just to recap, how much do you have to give? How much do you have to give?
Roughly around 2.5%.
Okay, 2.5%. You have to give 2.5% of your wealth in charity. 2.5% of your wealth in charity. So say if I had £200, of my life savings, £200, I have to give 2.5% of that money. Is that right? Huh? Rayan? Okay, so why is that wrong? Okay, so about £435. You have to have about £435. If you have £435 or more than that, then you have to give zakat on that. If you have less than that, if you have less than £435, then you don't pay zakat on that money, on those savings. Only if you have more. Okay, so if you have more than £435, then you pay 2.5% on that money. Now who has to give zakah? Just to recap, who has to give zakah? Okay, Muslims, just any Muslim.
No, not any Muslim. Well, at the right age.
Yeah, those people who have reached the age of discernment. Yeah, those who are grown up. Those people who are Muslim and they're grown up, they have to give zakah. They have to give zakah. Also, they have to have enough money. Yeah, like we mentioned, they have to have enough money for them to be able to give zakah in the first place. Now, who do you give zakah to?
The poor.
Okay, to the poor and those people who don't have enough money to look after their basic needs. Yeah, like food and clothing and things like this. So those people are who you give charity to. Who isn't allowed to give charity to? Who don't you give charity to? The descendants of the Prophet ﷺ. Who else? Your parents and your children. Very good. So those people you don't give zakat to. And there's one more person. Your parents, your children, the descendants of the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah, your wife or your husband. You can't give zakat to your wife or your husband. Yeah, because it should be providing for them anyway. It should be providing for them anyway. Okay, so what things do you have to give zakat on? What things do you have to give zakat on? Gold and silver you give zakah on, and also when it comes to any cash that you have. Yeah, so as long as it reaches that amount of money that you're supposed to give zakah on, if you have more than that money, then you take that amount and you make 2.5% of that money and you give it in charity. Yeah, so gold and silver and cash, and also when it comes to business assets. What does that mean? We mentioned this. If you have a business, When do you have to give charity on that? Zakat? Huh?
All the stuff that you have to sell.
Okay, all the stuff that you intend to sell, all the items that you have in your sweet shop or in your clothes shop or in your shoe shop or whatever shop you have, all those things that you have in that shop, you see how much it's worth and then you give zakat on that wealth. Yeah, on that, on all those items. Very good. So you give zakat on all of those things. And then the conditions of zakat. Yeah, you have to have intention. A person has to have the right intention, okay, when it comes to giving in zakat. So that's all we need to cover when it comes to zakat. Any questions about this, about zakah, giving in charity?
Do you have to give zakat occasionally to buy a wealth?
What do you mean, like?
So if you have a house or a car, you can acquire wealth from them.
No. You don't give zakah on your house or your car. You don't give zakah on your house or your car. Unless you have a house that you intend on selling. Okay? Because that's business now, isn't it? So say for example you've got a garage and you've got loads of cars that you want to buy and sell, Porsches and Ferraris and BMWs, and you want to sell them and you want to buy other cars, then those are items that you're using for business. So you give zakah on those things. Or if you have, houses that you sell, then you give zakah on those. Yeah. But if it's the house you're living in or your car that you're using, then you don't give zakah on that.
Is there a specific time of the year that you're supposed to give zakat?
There's no specific time, but a person should have a specific time of the year for himself. Yeah. So if you want to give zakah, you should take out a time every single year, and then you should say, for example, if it's June or July, then okay, in June I'm going to see how much money I've got, and then I'm going to give in charity depending on how much money I have. Yeah. Obviously, in a Muslim state, in an Islamic state, there would be a certain amount of time, the time of the year where a person, they would come around, they would take zakat from everybody. Yeah. But obviously, living here, there's no specific time, so you just give zakat any time during the year. So you pick a time, beginning of the year, for example, in January, or the end of the year, or any time of the year, and then you give zakat every single year at that time. You give in charity. Any more questions about zakah? Yeah, it's very simple. It's not very complicated. Yeah. So you give zakah on a certain amount of money. If you reach that amount of money, £435, okay, then you pay zakah on that money, and you pay 2.5%. Okay. And you give to the poor. And there's lots of charities that do this now, Islamic Relief and these other charities. So you can give those, you can give that money to them, and they'll give it in charity for you. Okay. So inshallah, next week we're going to be doing Hajj, inshallah, and it's going to be a little bit different next week. We're going to try to make it a bit more practical, interactive, inshallah. Yeah, so make sure you come, make it a bit more interactive, a bit more fun for you guys. So I'll see you next week. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم